Today, I'd like to discuss a topic that I'm sure is near and dear to every shop owner's heart: department store bikes. I know for many shop owners, this is the bane of your existence, but we need to talk about them. I know for a lot of shop owners out there, even hearing the phrase department store bikes might trigger you. This is a triggering topic for a lot of shop owners, and for good reason. There is a whole lot of headache baked into department store bikes, but I'm here to say that the way that shop owners deal with this problem is largely wrong. I'm not going to argue with you. Bikes from department stores are built to fail, and even a lot of the consumers who purchase them know this. The problem lies in the initial investment versus the cost to repair. So obviously on the sales side of your business, you're not dealing with the conundrum of department store bikes, which is a good thing. There's a reason, even though we're not a retailer specifically for like Trek or Specialized, that we do still stick to those brands because we want to have a product that we can confidently warranty. If we were selling, say, Nishiki or Huffy or Schwinn, we might have some other obstacles when it comes to bringing in those bikes, rehabbing them, and especially warrantying them as generously as we do. So it's very obvious on the sales side with the used bike model why you should still stick to the tried and true brands in the industry. But what about the service side? In a given year, our service department will see roughly a third of all the bikes coming in for repairs being department store grade bikes. And while most of the time this is a smooth process that takes place in just the same way as it would if somebody brought in a Trek or Specialized, sometimes there are tricky conversations to be had. This is the part where I argue many shop owners end up giving themselves the shaft. They make a quick and effortless move that simultaneously damages their reputation and loses them revenue. And that move is to turn their nose up and give some snide comment to the customer about how they should have bought something nicer, and then be dismissive about their idea of repairing the bike as if it's a silly notion. Now, it's obvious for me to tell you that you shouldn't be doing that as a business owner, but the reality is there is some truth to your statement, and that's what makes this situation so difficult. The truth is, if you do purchase a $200 department store bike and you bring it in and it needs a tune-up and a tube replacement, you are going to be spending 70% of the initial value of the bike in that repair. A lot of customers are not going to understand this, and they're going to be a little bit shell-shocked. And it's important to recognize that even though these conversations feel repetitive to you, this is the first time it's reaching the ears of the person you're speaking to, most likely. So while bike shops around the country largely deal with these conversations in a blunt and shorthanded way, we take a different approach. On one hand, we are certainly going to be respectful of our own time, and we're not going to bend the knee of doing a really inexpensive repair just because it's a really inexpensive bike. But on the other hand, we're not going to talk down to a customer just because we think that their purchase may or may not have been worth it. You have to figure out how to walk that tightrope and communicate clearly and firmly what the situation is while being respectful of the person. I'll tell you a protocol we use in our shop, and this is after years of trial and error because believe me, I do know how tricky this conversation can be. Our protocol for department store bikes coming in for service is this. We will speak to, quote, and assess your bike every bit the same way as we would any Trek, Giant, or Specialized. The change comes here. If your quote ends up being above about the $200 price point, we will postulate the idea to you that perhaps it may be more beneficial to replace the bike rather than to repair it. And I always like to follow that up with a sentence such as this. I would hate for you to sink too much investment into this bike only to potentially find more problems down the road. Saying things in that manner puts you on the customer's side while also voicing your concern at them putting too much into a bike that might not be worth it. I can get that same sort of message across without being so crass and while also keeping the ball in their court. When you say something along the lines to your customer, such as, "I would hate to see you put XYZ into this, and then it does not turn out well for you in the future. I have concerns about this because we see XYZ bikes come in. They tend to have bottom bracket issues. They tend to have issues with the axles. I've seen a lot of issues come up even after fixing them." Basically, you're voicing, hey, we're here. We see the problem you want fixed. We're willing to do it, but we just would like to voice our concerns. And you would think that most people, upon hearing that a $200 repair on a $200 bike will not guarantee them from further repairs in the near future, you would really think that most of them would sway towards replacement rather than repair. That's not the case at all. And here's another snag in the conversation where a lot of shop owners trip up. You'll voice your concerns, you'll be clear-headed in your statements, and they will still choose the repair over the replacement. So here's the thing that's important to realize in this stage of the conversation. You have to remember that the things that we own end up owning us, and it's not always about the dollars and cents. From your standpoint, having it not be your bike, all you can really see is why would you pay $200 for that and then invest the same amount into repairing it, and you're not even going to get longevity. Like, you're being told by an industry professional that you're not going to get longevity out of this bike. And yet that's just going right over your head. Put yourself in their shoes for a second. They scoured the aisles of all the shiny department store bikes, and they picked out the one that called to them, and then they took it out and they made some experiences with some rides with friends and family. Maybe they did their first 10-mile ride and that was a big deal to them. Or maybe it's a bike that they took on a first date. There's emotional value tied to that object, and it extends beyond the dollars and cents. We're all human and we all do silly things. It's cool that you're a bike guy, but I guarantee you own some silly things that people in other industries would say, "What are you doing?" I'm willing to bet a lot of people that have really nice bikes have really crappy cars. I'm one of those guys. I get comments from my car mechanic all the time. I commute on an all-city Cosmic Stallion, which is a bike that originally retailed for $4,000. And on the flip side, I get comments constantly from my car mechanic that maybe I should upgrade to something nicer. Everybody picks and chooses where they put their investment in their lives, and just because somebody is choosing not to put that heavy investment in their bicycle doesn't mean that you have to push your agenda on them. Once you frame this into perspective, it becomes way easier for you to repeatedly meet your customers where they're at. And you can do so in a way that is level-headed and fair, where you still voice your opinions as you should, because you should not take this too far on the other side and not advise them that they may be making a not mathematically sound investment. The onus is on you as the mechanic to at least look it over and give your honest review, but you need to do so in a non-judgmental way. And now here's the coolest part for you. 80% of the time, they still go ahead with the order, which means you get a $200 repair in the shop. You can question all you want whether or not it's worth it, but the reality is you presented the truth to your end customer, and they made their own autonomous decision as an adult. And now you're both gonna walk away happy. And that other 20% of the time, they might choose to replace, and if they do, they may or may not get that replacement from you. But it's not up to you to have emotions about it either way. So the next time somebody drags a department store swamp monster that hasn't seen the light of day because it's been in the bottom of a river for 10 years, and they want it fixed for less than $100, politely put it up in the stand, give it a thorough look over, give them a quote that respects your time, but then respectfully explain to them where it's at and what your thoughts are. Not only will your shop generate massive, fast-growing goodwill because of the volume of these bikes that go through service departments, but you will also honestly end up servicing a lot of these bikes. And it's all because you explained all the angles to them clearly, no judgment, no pressure. It's kind of counterintuitive because, as it turns out, the more onus you put on the customer, the more often they end up choosing to spend more with you. Whether that be getting the bike repaired with you or maybe finding a replacement, your honesty with lack of judgment goes a long way. And honestly, I do understand the frustration from shop owners because you are having this conversation hundreds, if not thousands of times a year. But I think just reminding yourself of where your customer is at can be really beneficial to you. For me personally, I grew up in a family of 4 boys, and we all passed down and destroyed our fair share of department store bikes. I didn't know the difference. My parents didn't know the difference. It wasn't a lack of intelligence, it was a lack of knowledge. We weren't bike people, yet. I would change that when I get into my 20s. So if you're looking to boost the service revenue numbers in your bike shop, just remember, take a stance of firm but honest when it comes to department store bikes.